sometimes some very difficult first steps are required. And this is where the politics with a small p really enters. A lot of constituency building and coalition formation required. And in this case, one of the most interesting challenges was that faced by Sri Mulyani Indrawati in Indonesia with the Ministry of Finance there, a case you may know a lot about. But in the wake of the Asian financial crisis, you had riots in Jakarta, Indonesia, civil society groups saying, new era of reformasi. There is lots of pressure on government to address corruption issues, to make services work better. Sri Mulyani is brought in as a top advisor in this and as Minister of Finance. And she became a star performer. But her challenge was very difficult. There was, again, a market for public office. That is, it was very hard to keep anybody in position more than six months because some of these positions were up for sale. She was in charge of the Ministry of Finance, which was publicly known to be in charge of some of the most corrupt parts of the government, in particular customs and the tax authority. So she appointed a committee to look very carefully at the situation. They reported back in about 3 months, and they decided that one of the things they needed to do in order to reduce the level of corruption in the Ministry of Finance overall and to improve performance was to get salary increases. Now, the public was not going to go along with this. Here was this highly mobilized public. They said, this section is thoroughly corrupt. How do you then turn around to them and say, well, the first thing we're going to do is raise the salaries? And to accomplish that, she did two things which I suspect you could not do here. And I assume it was because there wasn't strong union influence. But she basically fired everybody in customs and the tax authority and replaced them. So with this gesture, rather strong Machiavellian beheading in the public square, she then proceeded to work on the other employees. This is she, in her various capacities, oversaw 62,000 people. She then proceeded to take a series of other steps. I should say she also removed the two directors who were considered most corrupt. And she began to act on recommendations. She raised the salaries, but she wanted the managers all on board. So she convened them every week at her home for breakfast, where they would check in on the progress of the reforms they were making. And part of what they did was to announce a program of 35 excellent standard operating procedures. That is, to help engage the public as well as her own staff. They said, we are on a regular basis going to tell the public procedures we have revised in order to deliver services that the public wants better. So every year they would release 35 of these and a few every month. I wanted to observe that most of the successful reform stories we've looked at have tapped social pressures in some way on the job. That is, they've either harnessed work groups, sort of gotten people to working in a group so that the performance of each affects the other, and there's some link between that and a reward to the group overall. Or they've put people in new geography, a new space where everybody has a chance to interact or to watch one another. And they've often put citizens in a physical position that they can actually oversee the transaction and don't have to run up and down stairs and down corridors and across town to complete a service. So just want to highlight that that's one of the important dimensions. I won't go into some of the examples we have of that. Some are very clever strategies. Another common feature of all these is that they've really gotten down in the weeds, and I was very heartened about the story of the surgical division. The most successful stories we've looked at have really gotten down into the detailed operations. How does this organization work? What's not working? Diagnosis has been key. And can we, simply by changing locations, by figuring out how long it should take to do something, can we begin to make constructive changes in procedures that then eventuate in improvements overall? I was going to talk about the Jordanian passport division, which in the early 1990s did some of the very same things that have happened here in home affairs. And one of the first things that they did was to, with stopwatches, take the top 6 people in the division and go around and see how long it was actually taking to complete the passport process and what was causing some groups to perform less well than others. They then instituted, I should say, an audit system where the head of the program would actually disguise himself and suddenly show up in an office and ask for passport processing, and people became so alarmed that they might be audited that the performance picked up. A little coaching and a little consultation can go a long way. We tend to think about accountability as imposing a sanction for failing to live up to a standard. But very often people don't really know how to cope with the new rules, how to address to make their own situations work with the new rules. This has come up quite strongly in Brazil, where there were strong problems of corruption throughout the administration. And under Cardoso, there was an effort to implement conflict of interest rules, and they started at the very top. But instead of saying, here are the rules, now if you violate them, you will lose your position, you'll be prosecuted, they have instituted a system where every incoming person, whether a politician or a civil servant, meets with a board, and that board reviews the person's financial position and entanglements and occupation and says, all right, now here's how you can avoid getting caught by the rules. So they provide some counseling up front. And that performs a lot of different functions. It helps notify them what the rules are. It turns this unit into an ally. It shows people situations where they could get in trouble. They might not even have realized they could get in trouble, and helps them out. And then they have, if somebody violates after that, they have a bit more grounds to go after them. But this was introduced by one very highly motivated reformer who negotiated a coalition of support for it. And it seems to be working rather well, although it has occasionally caught a very high-level person in its web. And we've always wondered how long this reform would last. Seems still to be hanging in there.